I want to press right here up and
Okay. Well, good morning, all. I'll call our meeting to order this morning at 10 a.m. here on January 25 of this year. Please rise and join me and we'll sing O Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you all. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll call, please?
Counselor Mackey,
Present.
Counselor McKay,
Here.
Counselor Carlton, Counselor Pringle, Counselor McQueen will be joining, there he is right now, Counselor Nielsen, Counselor Patterson, Counselor Dickert, Counselor Kentner, Counselor Keaveney, Counselor Body, Counselor Gregg, Counselor Dobreen,
Present.
Counselor Matrosovs, Counselor Bordignon,
Present.
Counselor Eccles will be joining us later this morning. Counselor Hutchinson. We have all members in attendance with the exception of Counselor Counselor Eccles.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And before we begin, I want to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. And further, we give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, known collectively as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of these lands and waters. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and friendship with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. So our first order, is there any declaration of interest related to any items on today's agenda? Seeing none, if one should arise, of course, you can declare it at any time. Adoption of minutes. We have the minutes of the Long-Term Care Committee of Management minutes dated January 9 of this year. Someone care to move receiving of those? Counselor Matrosovs and Counselor Keaveney, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We also have the minutes of County Council and Committee of the Whole dated January 11th of this year. Would someone care to move those? Counselor Dickert, Counselor McKay. We're off to a good start. Any discussion on those minutes? All those in favor? That is carried. We also have the closed Committee of the Whole minutes dated January 11th. Someone care to move those? Counselor Patterson, Counselor McQueen. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. We have no closed meeting matters for our council portion. No reports. We have the confirming bylaw. Someone care to move that, please? Counselor Nielsen, Counselor Carlton. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. News and celebrations. Somebody have anything they wish to? Counselor Kentner, please.
I'd just like to, if you hadn't heard, announce that Councillor Rob Uhrig of the municipality of Meaford is the new chair of the Grace Sauble Conservation Authority. And the vice chair is the Councillor Dubik from West Grey. Sure.
Very good. Thank you. That's okay. That's okay. We knew what you meant, Ross. It's all good. Well, we wish those folks good luck in their new positions. Anyone else? I guess I would just add as warden that many of us were down at the Roma conference. I think it was a good conference by and large. I think the government ministers that anyone met with were attentive to our issues. Whether anything will change in the near future, time will tell. But I think the message was well received that something needs to change. We can't go on the way we are currently. And not just we, I mean, the entire municipal world. So anyway, enough of that. If there's no further news and celebrations, I'd take a motion to adjourn from our council meeting. Councillor Pringle and Councillor Mackey. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Just change over to our Committee of the Whole. Thank you, Rob. I'll call our Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Is there any declaration of interest related to any matter on this agenda? Not seeing one. You can declare it at any time, of course. We have a delegation this morning. And I'm going to try to get this right, but Andre Zavorgin. Zavorgin, all right. He's going to, he has a presentation this morning regarding peak oil and rural transition. And I will remind the speaker, you have 10 minutes. So welcome, and the floor is yours, sir.
Greetings in the love and light of the one infinite creator. I'm Andre Zvorgin, and today I'm presenting about peak oil and rural transition. This is Rystad Energy's Global Oil Reserve Outlook. It's one of the most detailed and reliable sources of oil reserve information. And since last year, it's declined by half a year in proven reserves and 1.5 years in proven reserves. And we have about 8.5 years remaining, if you look at either the proven or the probable, and with a range of about 5 to 16 years. And so, well, Hubert predicted it a long time ago, and but he predicted a smaller peak. However, with the updated metrics, we're still going to have a half peak production in about 2035. And there's kind of different estimates of how long it'll last. Alberta oil is a good example. So we peaked production in 1998 in terms of our natural gas and oil for conventional sources. And even though we continued to drill as much as we could, we didn't manage to increase it. So our peak wells was in 2009. And all tar sands are based on natural gas in order to be viable. US shale is what's currently powering most of the world, or most of the growth and production. But the shale wells are also limited, just like any field, and they have the wells spaced at like 100 meters apart now, so they're cannibalizing production. And in terms of the oil price, some people claim that the oil, as we get less oil, the price will go up, and then they'll be able to get the more difficult things. But actually, the oil price is dependent on money supply, and as we know, with high interest rates, the money supply goes down, and so the price of oil goes down. People are living in tents, they can't afford gasoline. So Limits to Growth study was published in the 70s, and it kind of predicted all of this. And so it seems like we're right on the money here. 2015 was our peak net energy with the lowest food prices in the world ever. And since then, they've been rising and increased food insecurity. Now, what will be the future? We're not 100% sure, but some say we'll peak in terms of total liquids, including natural gas liquids, by 2027. Some say because of power law distribution, we may have a steep decline. Unfortunately, we do not have enough minerals for a green energy transition. It would take hundreds to thousands of years at the current mining rates to mine enough, and we only have 8 left, or 16. Where are we? We're in scarcity industrialism. So EU, since they've sanctioned Russia, they're ahead of the curve. 55,000 companies have closed in France alone. They can't even manufacture condoms. So most of their heavy and medium industry is shutting it out. And so EROI basics, basically EROI 14 is enough to pay for arts. We had that in the 90s, and then enough to pay for healthcare. We had that in the 2010s. And now we don't have quite enough. And the school system, it's kind of variable, but we may have already lost it some, but we need to have enough to pay for truck drivers and farmers in order to maintain our society. And we may cross that boundary in the 2030s, at which point, if there's no food in the stores, with governments being in cities, it becomes a difficult proposition to continue. So EROI of different renewables are insufficient. And this coal and gas thing over here, you have to take into account that this was based on a certain time. Now that we have less reserves, the EROIs of these numbers are going down. Nuclear, especially thorium, is possible, but we don't have enough reserves to do enough for everybody. If we were to transition fully to nuclear, we'd only have 10 years of reserves left. So where are we headed? Salvage economy. So after the scarcity industrialism, we'd be going to salvage economy, where people would be living kind of like this, going to cities to collect the scrap, to take them to the rural areas where they can make them into tools and implements. And so there's 4, based on the mass dreams of the future, there's 4 different lifestyles. So one of them is the urban like this. One of them is like living like the Amish. 56 is the life expectancy, because it's very hard. And now there's also, if you go far up north into the northern Ontario, you can live a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. It's actually easier than the Amish, and they have a life expectancy of 70. But then there's also the New Age Sylvan food forest communities, which have a life expectancy of 89 years because all the food is on site. And it's easier to produce since once the trees are planted and producing, that they will produce for tens to hundreds of years. So this is a summary of what can work. And here, for example, for a family, you need to have 1 to 2 hectares per capita. For a family of 6, you need 6 to 12 hectares. And these are some possible ways of breaking it down. Optimal farm size based on global data is 5 to 10 hectares, so 12 to 25 acres. Church of community of 60 would have enough to also support bovine or equine transport, like a horse or a cow, because each horse or cow uses as much land as a person. So you wouldn't, not every person would be able to have their own horse or cow, but a 60 would. And with a village of 360, you could have a biogas facility. So if you all, in terms of the sewage disposal, if they all get their poop together, they'll produce enough biogas to power one van for, say, a weekly trip or emergency or something like that for like the paramedics. So that would be like on the county level. And a neighborhood would also have markets and stores, so that they'd be big enough for that, but also could have a bio FT process there for biofuels. Like you could make gasoline and diesel and things like that. Like each neighborhood would specialize in one of those. But it's about 18 liters per ton, 180 liters per ton that you could produce. So in a city of 55,000, you could have thorium industrial manufacturing, and a county would be able to do railroad and communication networks. So on the federal level, the recommendations are freeing up. We have like 87% crown land in Ontario, so freeing that up for 10 to 20 hectare lots. And then the recommended policy provincial would be to have a land protection act. So per capita land ownership would be capped at 10 to 20 hectares in South Ontario, and the surplus sold to citizens. And you can lobby through the AMO or something like that. So recommended policies for the county would be allowing and encouraging sustainable practices, 30 to 50 meter offset with a hedge to allow for a diversity of lifestyles. You don't have neighbors complaining, also to protect from roving bandits because there's increasing rural crime since people in the city are not able to provide for themselves. County radio, fiber optic, and consider rail. Recommended policies municipal to make minimum lot size of a hectare for single person occupancy is just so that, because if they're living there, they should be able to provide for themselves, grow their own food and firewood. And affordable housing and temporary housing permits to enable residents to live on their land while they're building more permanent structures, because we have that housing crisis. And encourage formation of community associations such as churches and villages to foster collaboration and resource sharing. And so, well, how am I helping? I'm coming over here all the time, and I email you guys Friday mornings. You can check your spam, I don't know. And then I run an IT business, and I've got a proof of concept tree seedling business. So I know all the food trees we can grow here, and I go to a local Mennonite church. And so, yep, that's the end of the presentation.
Wow. Well, that's great. You went through a lot of stuff there in a hurry. So congratulations. Interesting presentation. Are there any questions for Andre? Scott, or Councillor Greg, sorry.
That's all right. I get a lot of it. I just want to thank you for the deputation here today. I think there's actually a lot of truth in your slides, in the information that you put out there. I think humanity, we don't want to address that particularly. We're all about what's good for us right in here and now. I remember being in high school, it's getting to be longer ago now, and projections at that time in geography and sustainability was oil reductions by 2025, 2028. Like those were projections back in the early 90s, and I don't think we're that far off. We're nowhere close to the transition where we need to be. And I don't think we want to address or recognize the potential outcomes in civilization once we actually hit hit that point in time where those necessary fuels for our existence are really diminishing. So I think it's great, the emails and the information that you put forward. Keep doing it. The more people that are aware, and ultimately every piece of plastic that we don't use is the most important contribution that we can make. Every time I see schools wanting to put air conditioning in because we have 7 hot days a year, that's the wrong choice. We have to reduce our energy consumptions in so many ways, because we can't continue going on the trajectory which we've set forward. So thanks for the presentation today.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Mr. Ward, and yeah, thank you for your presentation today. Certainly thought provoking, and we do know that, I know they've always said I've growing up is the last barrel of oil, nobody will ever be able to afford it. They always say, right? So because it'll be the last one. But I had a tour of the oil sands in Alberta in 2017, and that was a bit of an eye opener. But as I understand, is Alberta has, I think, the 3rd largest reserve, something like that, in the world. But the easy oil is gone. It's the hard oil now so with the tar sands, you have to solidify it, and plus access is a little harder. And now I understand that there is a pipeline that will be opening up at some point into the West Coast, but that's leaving Canada. But certainly we live a carbon-based economy from our heating to our fuels, and there is that transitioning starting to happen. And there are stuff like nuclear and hydrogen and other possibilities, but it's not that what do you call it, the super bullet, or what do you want to call it? So we do have to keep thinking about and I guess the other question is the world's population continues to grow too, which from a food perspective. And I will say that I know a particular large farmer that is looking at investment in the further north. I was talking to somebody there just when we were down at Roma, past New Liskeard into the Cochrane region, and there's an area there that they are looking at opening up for food production. And that's a key thing, is feeding the world as well, and how that works. But it's still not based on carbon-based fuel that makes that dirt turn over and stuff. So anyway, thank you for your presentation, but it is something that we got to keep thinking for our next generation and our grandkids and our great grandkids. And yes, sustainability and survival is important as well. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? I'll give you yeah, sure, go ahead. Yep.
Okay. To respond to Greg's comment, so actually, in terms of the waste, I think it would be because of the salvage economy, it would be a good idea to have a local landfill in the county. I know we have one in Southgate, and because that would be where a large amount of the future resources are, because it's very difficult to say smelt iron ore, especially now that we have depleted most of them. But it's much easier to say go to the scrapyard or the landfill and get well, especially scrapyards would be very good, because then you could get that metal and then repurpose it for something more useful. Or you could even melt down a lot of different kinds of plastics and then repurpose those. And in terms of the oil situation, so in the tar sands, what's important to know is that the EROI of the tar sands is 2.5. So it's not even enough to truck the fuel. We're using gasoline and diesel to truck the fuel, and we're actually using natural gas in order to get the fuel or the tar to melt it out of the sand. You have to have 5 tons of sand and 3 barrels of water. And then you have to have enough natural gas to boil those 3 barrels in order to get 1 barrel of tar sands out of our current tar sands. And so but I do foresee that we could either rail or waterway that tar sands later in the future for things like plastics if we need it. And in terms of the population, they did have a population graph in the limits to growth study, and they do foresee it also declining Now, the mass streams of the future, they, with their projections they projected 2,500 people to the years 2100 to 2500. And they found that by 2100, there was a 94% population decline. And that is consistent with historical collapses such as the Bronze Age collapse when they ran out of tin. There was also 94% decline in the rural areas for sure. But then it goes back up in the by 23 to 2500s, it rebounds to like 30%. So that will be several billion instead of around a billion.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Don't see any. So thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate you taking time to come to County Council. Thank you. So moving on, we have the consent agenda there. There's a number of items there. Does anyone wish any of those removed for further discussion? If someone would make a motion to receive those, Councillor Hutchison and Councillor Matrosovs. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Items for direction and discussion. The first is our report on green development standards. This is the January of this year update, and we have Rebecca Denard here, our manager, climate change initiatives. So welcome, Rebecca. And I need someone would. What do we need to do? Receive this? So I need a mover and a seconder to receive. Councillor Nielsen and Councillor Eccles. Very good. Okay, Rebecca, welcome, and the floor is yours.
There we go. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, happy to be here today, talking, there's two reports from the Climate Department, and our first is about an update on our green development standards. So what are green development standards? These are measures for developers and builders to create thoughtful and innovative developments using sustainable design. It's based on principles to guide development at the planning level, and it focuses on the community as a whole. It's a critical tool for municipalities to achieve their GHG reductions, targets, and adapt to climate change. It's also identified as the Community Action 11 in our Going Green and Gray, which is one of our 5 key next steps. So this has been done in several places in Ontario. Some places with completed green development standards are the town of Whitby, the town of Halton Hills, Township of King, town of East Gwillimbury, City of Pickering, City of Brampton, City of Toronto. And they're also in progress in the Waterloo Regional Municipality, as well as the town of Caledon. And that was just my quick overview. I probably have missed some along the way because it's happening in many, many places at this point. So our project is a collaboration with Dufferin and Wellington counties to create a unified green development standards across 3 upper tier and 24 lower tier municipalities. So the key activities for this project is going to be outreach and engagement with key stakeholders through presentations, workshops, webinars to advance the creation of a consistent framework. And having a unified green development standards for this whole region will really help the development industry adopt these new approaches rather than a piecemeal approach where there's different standards in different places and they have to try to adapt to different things in different places. So staff have engaged a consultant, which is Urban Equation and the Planning Partnership. They did the development standards in both Whitby and Pickering through an RFP process. And we started work on this project in Q4 of 2023. Each county is contributing $75,000 to this project. That was allocated, I believe, in the 2023 budget, but we're spending it over time as the project progresses. So some of the benefits of green development standards, this is an interesting segue from the previous presentation. So this is going to be some of the solutions to those problems. So reducing greenhouse gas and energy consumption, reduces dependency on vehicles, improved water management, green space and biodiversity, and also increases our climate resilience. Some of the social benefits, improving air quality, promoting active lifestyles, that mixed use and affordable housing, which is another goal from Going Green and Gray, and it promotes community design and really embraces cultural heritage and culture. economically, it increases property values, reduces municipal infrastructure costs, makes a longer lasting building stock, creates affordable energy for the residents of the houses, and creates jobs in the construction and design of these developments. Okay, so this is the exciting part that's still a little new. So we have a conditional offer from a federal funder. This is contingent on successfully negotiating a contribution agreement. And the potential funding is up to 445,600 and extends this project to March the 31st of 2027. We're expecting to have a draft contribution agreement available for us to sign in 2024, February, just in a few weeks. And then that will be reviewed by staff, and if agreeable, we need a bylaw authorized by the warden and clerk to sign this contribution agreement when it is available. So the contribution agreement will include the schedules which we developed, which outline our project deliverables, timelines, budgets, and then the rest of the agreement will be fairly boilerplate legal which will be the same and consistent around all the other projects they're funding. So not a lot of wiggle room in that one. So that's what we're hoping to do today, is to get the authorization to sign that contribution agreement so that we're able to accept the funding and move forward with the expansion of this project. So this is what this extra funding is going to be able to enable us to do beyond what our initial investment was going to give us. So we're going to have some additional consultations with stakeholders around the gaps and challenges of the current system, potential incentives of what we need, and then really developing the criteria that we're looking for in a green development standards. There'll be additional training and certification opportunities. This would be for staff, for tradespeople, for developers. So really trying to get people up to speed and offer that opportunity to get to where they need to be. Also a talent and business attraction plan. This will be working with our economic development departments in all 3 counties, potentially as well as consultants, to really bring in the people and the businesses that we need to implement this green development standards. We're also hoping that this project will be an inspiration to others. So a playbook of resources that we will develop for this project that we will put into a good package that will enable other small and 2-tier municipalities to follow in our footsteps and also implement these standards. And we hope to be able to share these learnings at some of the conferences that we have going on. So potentially at FCM or at Roma or at the ICLEI's Sustainable Cities Conference. Obviously, we have to be invited to those, but we're hoping to have the content available. This is possibly the most significant upgrade that we would get with the funding, which would be a 2-year contract person who would be at Grey County, but serving the whole region. And this would be someone to really aid in implementation. So be that the point person. So if staff, if developers, if anybody have questions about how do we do this, what am I supposed to do here? What do I put in box 24? This is the person that they can call and find out and really help them to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and facilitate that process. We'll also have annual recognition events to really celebrate the great work that's being done in green development in the 3 counties. And yeah, so next steps for this, we are hoping to sign that contribution agreement with the federal funder in February of 2024. So in the next few weeks, we have an all staff virtual information session coming up on March 22nd. That's to really introduce the project so that all staff understand what it is we're trying to do. There's an in-person public visioning session on March 27th. This is the chance for the public to give input about what do they want to see in terms of a sustainable community. There's also a development industry information session that we'll be scheduling for them to have their say about what they want and what, to get them informed. We have those additional feedback and workshops in April and June, hopefully to create a draft of the green development standards over the summer, and then get feedback on that draft again from developers, public, staff. And then hopefully we'll be here with a finalized green development standards presentation to council before the end of the year of 2024. So that's the project, and happy to take any questions before we move on to the next one.
Thank you, Rebecca. Are there any questions related to that report? Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Rebecca. You spoke about trying to avoid piecemeal. To me, this feels like piecemeal, you know, because we're doing it 3 county. Why isn't this a provincial or a federal initiative? You listed a number of different municipalities that are already, you know, doing this development. But if it's above and beyond the Ontario Building Code, are we going to be imposing upon our builders additional requirements locally that maybe in a neighboring county they wouldn't incur, and we're going to drive business away from our municipality? So when you mention piecemeal, this just feels like piecemeal to me, and I just wonder why we're getting involved in something that in my mind is a federal or provincial responsibility.
There we go. Sorry. Yes, great question. So what we've heard from the province is that they are moving in this direction. They are looking to work with municipalities to step up the Ontario Building Code so that it matches the federal code. And they're looking to, basically, we're getting ahead of the game. So instead of having to play catch up when the province moves to a more stringent building code, we will already be at or beyond that standard. They are working actively with municipalities to do this. They just move a little more slowly than we can as municipalities, and Randy can follow up.
Just to build on Rebecca indicated, so the National Building Code, so federally, it has been updated to apply some of these principles. As Rebecca indicated, the plan is going forward that the provinces will update their codes as well to align. So this project would look to at least align to some of the federal codes, with the anticipation that the provincial codes will also be updated. We anticipate hopefully in the next few years. So that way there'll still be that consistent overall framework that's been set at the federal level in terms of those codes. We also want to make sure it works for, in this case, for our county and our municipalities, for Grey County. So the importance of having consultations and discussions with the development industry, the local development industry, Georgian College, some of the consultants, some obviously local municipalities, the chief building officials, inspectors, it has to work for Grey County. So, so as Rebecca indicated, it is a bit to get ahead of the game, to be prepared for these changes, because we anticipate these changes will be happening in the next few years provincially, but all aligned to the federal code. So that is the consistent framework. So to try to match that going forward. So we hope that through this project we'll be ahead of the game, so to speak, and be able to start implementing these things, because it's cheaper to build right off the bat than to retrofit after the fact. And so if we can incorporate some of these principles right at the time of building, we think it's going to be much more energy efficient. Therefore, those energy costs for the homeowner will be less, as well as also working towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which will meet some of the targets that have been set by council. So that's why the plan is to work at least with the 3 counties to create again, a rural green development standard that will work for our counties and our municipalities and our developers. And so that's the intent of this project, is to work that out through that process.
Fair enough. Councillor Matrosov and then Councillor Eccles.
Thank you. Through you, the chair, and I would like to just take a bit of a different perspective on what Councillor Mackey has just introduced, because certainly I concur. We certainly, when it's something that we all need to solve at the same time, we want to look for the greatest mass to be able to do that. But from our perspective, this is bold action number 9 of our integrated community sustainability plan in the town of Blue Mountains. And we recognize that it didn't make sense to be doing 9 different efforts. It made much more sense to work on the county level as a start. So what I would hope is that it actually uplifts our development community, because remember, there's a sliding scale between voluntary and mandatory categories, as well as a timeline. You know, if there are good practices in there that are voluntary now, but then when the national code finally comes out, everything settles, then, you know, there's a migration of which pieces then need on an upper level to become mandatory. It is actually going to be helping us here in Grey County, both from the municipal side as well as from our developer side, to get familiar with the changes that will be coming, get ahead, as we've heard, get ahead in this case, because then we can be that voice at the table too. So my question through the chair over to staff would be, how do we make sure that the fact that we would be taking this kind of initiative to be at the front and say, we know this is the trend and we want to be able to put our input in to make sure it's made in Grey, it makes sense for Grey County and our developers that work within here. How do we make sure then that kind of experience that we're doing up front is part of that negotiation table at the provincial and the national level?
Rebecca?
There we go. Gosh, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so I think that the tools for that is going to be that playbook and those presentations that sort of come with this funding. This funding is enabling us to sort of create a toolkit as we go, so that we have these resources that we then we can share through the various channels at the provincial and national level, so that the story of this project doesn't just stay in Grey County, that it becomes something that is an inspiration and a resource for our neighbors to move forward. I mentioned Waterloo Region is also working on this at the same time. So we're sort of coordinating with them potentially to raise the standard and work to get that forward as a first step. And then just having this project, it's one of the first that's really addressing this in small communities, because it's going to look different. Green development standards look different in Grey County than they do in the city of Toronto. So we can't just sort of grab somebody else's and slap it on. We need to really have a considered approach of things that are going to work for us, that are tailored to our communities, and then potentially would work for similar communities that are outside our county and around the province.
No, I agree with Rebecca that we want to, through this project, to be able to share some of those best practices, and that's whether that's with our neighboring counties or the provincial level, or through some of those other through AMO, through other channels. The more we can share some of our experience, especially when we're applying it through a lens in rural Ontario, for smaller townships, smaller municipalities, we think that this project will be able to provide some of that, what works, what doesn't work, concepts to others. So that's what we're hoping to be able to achieve through this project, for sure.
Thanks, Randy. Councillor Eccles.
Thank you, Rebecca, for timely bringing this up, but how close are we to understanding or where the green development standards are? Are they, maybe I missed that in your presentation, are they set, we're already done? Or is it a provincial government that is going to set them and then the Ford's going to be in reverse? I think I heard that once this week already.
Rebecca?
There we go. Okay. Yeah. So the project is to create a made in Grey green development standards. There are existing models from other places, but those are sort of our background research. We look at what's been done in other places and then put our own together. And that's the process that we're going to be working through with our staff from the lower tiers and from ours and from development industry. So the timeline for that is we're going to be doing all of those input sessions over the course of the spring. And then our consultant who's drafted these standards for other places is going to take what they heard in all of our consultations, go away, create us a draft. That draft should be ready by the end of the summer. And then we would bring that back to the stakeholder groups and say, hey, what do you think? What needs to change? What needs to come in? What needs to come out? And then we refine those through a process of working with staff and with councils. And then at some point we get, hopefully by the end of this year, we're back here presenting, this is what we think the standard should be for Grey County. Oh, actually for the whole region, we're trying to get it to be consistent across the whole region. So then we would present that and then they would be adopted into bylaws and official plans as of once they're drafted based on that consultation process. Right.
Is that all right? Go ahead.
So the hiring of the staff would be after all of that work comes into play. Is there that those got a dovetail? Is there a provincial or federal standards that our standards would have to develop?
So we're looking to go beyond what is currently in the provincial standard, and we'll be looking at what, if there's changes in that as we go along, we would, incorporate that into our plan. So we need to keep an eye out what's happening at the provincial and the federal level, but then we're really trying to make a made in gray solution for these green development standards. That makes sense.
And just to build on that further, as we know, the Ontario Building Code sets kind of the minimum standards. So there are some things that obviously from just a best practices, from a cost efficiency perspective that could be incorporated, that although goes above those minimum standards, that could be easily incorporated, that in the end results in some reductions in terms of energy consumption. So, and therefore lowering utility costs for those homeowners and business owners. So that's what we want to explore. But again, it has to be a made in gray approach, has to work for our development industry, has to work for our local municipalities when they're applying the code and the inspections as it relates to this. There are provisions under the Municipal Act and the Planning Act that allows us to consider these initiatives. In fact, the province confirmed, even with all the changes that were happening to the Planning Act, that the provisions as it relates to applying sustainable design standards to buildings is still protected, interest and ability for municipalities to apply. So we want to look for that opportunity. We want to make sure it's like I said, works for folks in Grey County, and that's why we're hoping to obviously work with this project and work with each of the local municipalities and others to make sure we get this right.
Councillor Kentner, please.
Thank you. Would I be wrong to make a parallel to the accessibility rules? Like we've all been playing catch up in every municipality, going like heck, trying to catch up and be ready for 2025. Is this a case where we have the opportunity to be just a bit ahead of the curve and not be running as hard as we've been running on that particular file?
Yes, that's a great analogy. We really, it's so much better to have a plan and have the consultations done and have an understanding of what we need in our community before the province starts telling us what we need to do, because we have that, we know if we've heard from our development industry, if we've heard from our communities, this is what a green development standard needs to be. Then when the province comes and asks us what we want, or we have the opportunity to tell them and we don't get something imposed that was designed for Toronto, that was designed for places that aren't here, we have the opportunity to say, hey, look, this is what we've got. It's working here. We are ahead. We've developed it. And we're not playing catch up or trying to fit ourselves into a box that wasn't made for us.
Councillor Gregg, did you have? Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for recognizing me, Warden, and through you, just a couple quick questions. So it's, it's common knowledge that building standards have variability. Just think earthquakes. So you don't build long-term care homes in Ontario like you would in Vancouver. One thing I'm wondering about when you go through this exercise and you've got different colleagues and peers and comparators is that right now, and just coming back from Roma, arguably the number one item in front of the population right now is affordability. And what I would like to know is what is the impact on home construction, affordability that can be taken from your other colleagues, or how you're going to plan on incorporating that in, because it's not so much the interest rate that is the problem on people right now. 6%, 5.5%, 7%, whatever. It's the amount of money you're applying the interest rate to. That's what's devastating people. So I guess that's what I'm keenly interested in is how are we moving forward with the affordability as a key component of what the action plan is going to be tailored to?
So yes, that's a great question, and certainly top of mind is to make sure that we're creating housing that is both affordable and sustainable. It really comes down to looking at life cycle costs, because potentially you would need to invest a little bit more in the house or the development initially, but every single homeowner that lives in that house after that initial construct will have lower energy costs, will have less upkeep and maintenance costs, will not be burdened with the cost of retrofitting things after the fact to meet ongoing standards or to try and reduce their energy costs. So it's a little bit of consideration and design and effort upfront can save a lot of challenges down the line when you're getting a house that's moving potentially to, the house ages, it's not the people who bought it in the first place. It's all those other homeowners that you have going down the line who will benefit from it being built right in the first place.
Councillor Body.
Thank you, Warden Milne. I think, in the long run, big picture, having better green standards and having more efficient standards is the right thing to do. However, a developer doesn't give a crap about what it's going to cost somebody to heat their house. They care about their profits right now. I don't know. I've kind of found from my experience being in Ensemble, when we require things like wastewater, water, curbs and those types of things, developers much happier to go outside the city of Ensemble to put in take a field and put in 32 homes on wells and septic beds. They're going to go to where it is cheapest for them, and you've got to be so careful what you add to them. It's unfortunate I don't see Bruce County involved in this because, one of the developers that owns most of the developable lands in Graham Bruce can build over there. And if he can put an extra couple bucks in his pocket versus in ours, or in the house itself, I think that's a natural thing for a developer to do. So I think we've got to be really careful trying to team up with Kitchener, Waterloo, and other places on our own. I think it's great that if the whole province did it, the whole country did it. I think it's needed, there's no doubt, but I think we got to be careful in the short term that we're getting into competition with our neighbors and we're losing because we've added the standards. One of the things that is going on that will influence the developer is the CMHC money coming federally to be able to do multi-res. A few years ago, the formula was about the number of units that were at an attainable price. Example of Strathcona School that Barry built that did that. His next development over in 28th Street in Owen Sound, it was a different formula that did include green energy type things, efficiencies, accessibilities, as well as affordability. So the formula changed, and it allows a developer to be able to apply for those funds and get a reduced interest rate, which allows him to build. We've heard from all of them that it's been very tough the last couple of years. With the cost going up of materials through COVID. So we're fighting that. At the Clean Energy Frontier Summit on Friday, we heard from the economist at OMERS that was talking about things are going to be down for a little while because of interest rates, because of the cost of building. The developers can't afford to develop just as quickly. The market isn't there to support them. So I think we've got to dance that fine line between increasing costs for developers, increasing costs for home buyers, and doing it in the long run, the right thing in the long run. But not painting ourselves into a corner that we're not competing with municipalities next door. And it'd be great if Bruce County was involved with this. I don't know how you get them involved or why they aren't, but developers will go to where they can put more monies in their pocket. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, at the time when this project was initially a concept, We did reach out to all the neighboring counties. I think the timing just wasn't right at the time for Bruce County. I think since that time, I think, you know, they're making some further advancements on a number of areas in terms of sustainable energy and looking at different things. So I know that they're very interested in the results of this project and want to obviously continue to monitor it. And we'd be happy to include folks from Bruce County as well as Simcoe County and others in terms of some of those consultations and workshops, just so again, they have the benefit of hearing from local developers and others about how we can implement this collectively throughout our greater region. So yeah, so we'd be happy to incorporate that as part of this. But like I said, just at the time, it just wasn't the right timing for them. But I think yeah, I think the timing might be a bit more right for them to be able to look at something like this, either not necessarily right away, but maybe in the future as well. So I know, like I said, I know they're very interested in the results of this project.
Councillor Eccles.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So I guess to that point, is this, like I understood and from the recommendation that it's a Green Standards project in partnership with Wellington and Dufferin. But in the last 5 minutes, all that I've heard is the Made in Gray. Is this a partnership program or is this totally Made in Gray? Because if we're going to sell it as a partnership, we better start now, not to hear what I'm saying.
Yeah, so yes, it is a tri-county effort. So we're trying to get a unified standard for this whole region to sort of mitigate some of the issues that Councillor Body was bringing forward of having different standards in different places and giving the opportunity for developers to sort of shop around and find the best deals. So we're trying to get it at least the same in all of our counties. I guess I was thinking of Made in Gray because we here are concerned with what happens in Gray County. Of course, we want our neighbors to all keep up and be great as well, but more concerned. But we are looking for a unified standard for at least this whole region, and then giving the opportunity, hopefully, to bring, once we have the standards made, it would be potentially easy for a Bruce or a Simcoe to adopt, look at what we've done and just make some tweaks, and then it will work. It'll be a made in Bruce solution for them. So.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any other questions? I have a mover and seconder to receive and to authorize staff to bring the bylaw forward. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The next report is regarding the rural recharge project, speaking to electric vehicle charging network partnership. So Rebecca, that's your report as well. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Carlton and Councillor Pringle. Thank you very much. Rebecca.
There we go. On to the next. So this is another collaborative project, again, with some of our neighbors. So this began as the Regional EV Partnership Project, which is now called Rural Recharge. And this is a collaboration between Gray, Bruce, Dufferin, Wellington, Huron, and Perth counties. The project was to expand the availability of publicly available EV charging infrastructure in our region. And the purpose was, again, to fill gaps in existing infrastructure with a coordinated strategy rather than a piecemeal approach of adding one by one charges over time without a strategy. And this project will support Community Action 7, which encourages the adoption of electric vehicles, which is one of the 5 key next steps in going green and gray. So I'm sorry the text is super small on this, but I will read it for you. So this is some of the project roles. It's a little complicated, so I wanted to put the arrows about who connects to who. So the municipalities or private landowners, they will own the properties where the charges are located, and they will be entering into an agreement with IV once the funding is secured, and we'll get to IV in a moment. Then we have the steering committee, which is made up of members of staff from the participating counties. So I sit on that. It meets bi-weekly, and we really direct the strategy for the project. We also have a consultant, which is Community Energy Associates. So we direct them and give them information about what we want them to be doing. Dufferin County is the lead organization on this project. They have the agreement with CEA, and the other counties have an agreement with Dufferin. So that's how those all kind of put together. So Community Energy Associates is our consultant on this project. We've been working with them since 2021. They were the consultant that developed the network strategy in the first place. And they were selected by the steering committee through an RFP. They developed the RFP that secured Ivy to be our provider for this project, and the steering committee had input both at the developing the RFP and as well as selecting the proponent. They act as our liaison between Ivy and us, and they hold the agreement with Ivy. So that Ivy Network was unanimously selected by the steering committee through the CEA's RFP process. They will own and operate the charging infrastructure. They're also applying to MTO funding on behalf of the project. And once the funding is secured, they will enter into an agreement with the municipalities and landowners. So that kind of gets the full circle of how all these players connect to each other. Okay, so site selection, where are we going to put these things? The phase 1 of the project was in 2021-22, and it identified 17 community locations as a baseline network. The idea was that we wanted to make it possible for people to go anywhere in the region and never be too far away from a charger. So it reduces the range anxiety, make sure that people feel confident they can just charge there. They don't have to stick to one particular route that they've planned out in advance. They can kind of go where the spirit moves them and what they find interesting and explore the area without these constraints. So some sites were added because of additional capacity, and others were dropped because another organization put in chargers. So that site then became redundant for the needs of the network. Just at the community level, we had several sites identified within the community, and the preferred locations were decided on based on proximity to amenities, natural dwell time, travel patterns, accessibility of the parking, and the availability of power for the chargers. And now that we are at the point where we have the address selected, this exact site plans have not yet been developed. So this is exactly like where on the parking lot, where on the property the chargers will be put. They will be developed at a later time, and they will be brought to the staff for approval so that we make sure that we're putting the chargers in a place that works for staff over the long term on the property. So these are the proposed sites. This has been somewhat of a moving target as things develop. So there's a slight change from what was proposed in your reports. The sites in Grey Highlands, we had 2 sites, one in Fletcherton, one in Markdale under consideration. They have now decided to just go forward with the Markdale site. We were having some challenges finding a location in Fletcherton that we had the necessary approvals to move forward with the application. So because Fletcherton and Markdale are fairly close, we figured we can get away with just doing the charger in Markdale for now. There's always the potential to expand this network and go further in the future. I also like to speak to the sites in Georgian Bluffs, both in Springmount and in Shallow Lake. So these sites were not additionally identified as being required for the base network, but the township of Georgian Bluffs already had them budgeted, and they were going to put chargers there anyway, and wanted to really be part of this project and realize the benefits of joint procurement and being part of this network. So those sites, and only those sites, are being financed by municipalities. So they are putting in the capital costs and applying. Ivy is still applying for the MTO funding. And once the sites are built, they will operate like all of the other sites in the network. So how is this getting financed? Ivy is going to be responsible for all the costs of installing, operating, and maintaining the chargers. And this would include any upgrades to the electrical system that need to happen and the ongoing power usage. It will be coming, they will get their power directly from the grid. It won't be coming through any municipal panels. So there's no burden on the municipality to bill them for power. The public then pays a fee to Ivy to charge their vehicles. This is Ivy's business model. That's how they cover their costs for installing all this stuff. The municipality would enter into a 5-year agreement to allow Ivy to operate the chargers on municipal land. Ivy is currently financing the draft agreement with their legal team, and that will be reviewed by the municipalities. And if agreeable, that'll be brought back to council for approval. The agreements will be entered into once there's an offer of funding on the table. So this is the MTO funding, the Charge On, which is an MTO program which provides funding up to 50% of project costs. So Ivy will be applying for this funding and will hold the agreement with the MTO. And this really removes the administrative burden of operating the chargers from the municipality. We did consider a path where the municipality would apply for this funding and they would get a 75% of project costs covered. But in that case, the municipality has to be responsible for owning, operating, insuring, reporting. All of the duties would fall on the municipality. So we decided that that wasn't in the spirit of this project. So that plan got changed so that now Ivy is going to do the application and is going to take care of all that administrative burden going forward. So because of the nature of this funding, each location requires a separate application. So it's probable that out of the 30 or so sites we are applying for, potentially not all of them will be funded. So what happens if a site isn't funded? Potentially Ivy would assume 100% of the costs of doing it just to fill in the network. Again, they would look to enter into an agreement with the municipality if they were going to go down that path. If we don't get a lot of sites funded, we may be pursuing the federal ZVIP funding, which is the federal funding for electric vehicle chargers. That's supposed to open in the spring of 2024. Obviously, if that is the path, it's going to delay the installation, because if we apply in the spring, unlikely that we'll be building in the summer of 2024. So that will be the path if we really don't get enough chargers funded through the MTO to really fulfill the goals of the project. So if we only get 4 or 5 out of the 30 we apply for, then obviously we're going to need more to get the project really to accomplish its goals. So we'll see what happens about the funding. The other possibility is that the site might be considered redundant. If the MTO funds a site from another project that's across the street or down the road, we may decide that, well, that charging needs are taken care of in that community and we don't need to proceed with putting in a competing site right in the same neighborhood. So once the MTO has the funding decisions, that's when we will be seeking to enter into agreements with the municipalities and moving forward with the project. So just a little bit about the community investment of this project. So the Grey County's total contribution to rural recharge to date is just under $10,000. This was our contribution to hiring the consultant CEA, who has really coordinated the whole business. The project could lead to 6 level 3 and 12 or more level 2 chargers being available for our community, as well as any tourists coming through. On average, a level 3 costs between $100,000 and $200,000 per port to install, and a level 2 costs about $10,000 per port. So just over $1 million investment from Ivy and the MTO in the community. We are successful with all of our sites. And yeah, that's that one, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good morning, everyone. And a question, Rebecca, if I may. How was it decided where a level 3 charger would be placed as opposed to a level 2?
That's a great question. So that was in the initial strategy of where to put what, and the thought was that we were trying to put level 3s in places where we're looking for a quick turnaround, where someone would maybe stop for lunch, stop for a quick visit to a library or something that you're not potentially spending hours at a place, whereas the level 2s were put in places where it's more natural that the people would be staying there for a longer period of time. Obviously, level 3s would be great if we could afford to put level 3s everywhere, but the decision was really like, where do we need people to feel like they can get a fast charge and get on their way? Yeah, do you want to go?
And just to build on what Rebecca indicated, so as Rebecca noted, as part of the original study was to look at, based on where the chargers exist today, what gaps need to be put in place in terms of what charging locations to be put in place to fill some of those gaps. So having a certain distance between level 3 chargers and level 2 chargers from a overall network perspective, again, to help ease some of that EV charging anxiety that Rebecca indicated when people are traveling to and from various destinations. So that was part of that analysis in terms of looking at where should level 3 chargers be located and where should supporting level 2 chargers also be located. So that's what was looked at and analyzed as part of an overall network framework across all those counties to try to fill some of those gaps.
Any other questions? Counselor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden, and through you. Rebecca, is there any rent going to be paid for the addition of these chargers on municipal properties? I guess I asked that question, you know, if any other private enterprise was looking at putting infrastructure on our property, we'd be looking at some sort of agreement where they would be paying some rent to us. So I'm just wondering if rent will be supplied to Grey County. Thanks.
That's a great question, and it's one we've been talking about with Ivy. Their business model is contingent on being able to make those chargers profitable, and it's quite borderline for them in these smaller, less off the beaten track locations, at least compared to a stop, you know, in off a major highway or in downtown Toronto. The business model doesn't incorporate them paying rent to us for the spot. But we are looking at how does that work within the legal framework of what a municipality needs to make this agreement work. So it's an ongoing question. We were trying to get an answer sorted out before this meeting and have not yet got it. We're looking to get a draft agreement from Ivy, and that will sort of contain more of the details about how the agreement with the municipalities will work. But we're looking, their priorities, obviously those applications for the MTO are due at the end of the month. So their priority is to try and get the applications in, and then we'll be looking at those agreements as soon as possible after that, so that we address any of those questions of bonusing or potential unfair practices. We want to make sure that we're thinking about that.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any other questions? Okay, I'll call a question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Rebecca. So we have some closed meeting matters, but I see it's 10 after 11. Why don't we take a 10-minute break? We'll come back at 11:20. So I apologize. I felt like I was still at the Roma conference and felt compelled to speak to everybody I met in the hallway, so we'll bring this back to order here as soon as Rob gives me the thumbs up. There we go. Thumbs up. We're back in order. And we have a closed meeting matter, or three actually, to deal with. So the motion is that the committee of the whole does now go into closed session pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss labor relations or employee negotiations, specifically an OPSU matter at Greg Gables and Lee Manor bargaining upset limit request. The second is labor relations or employee negotiations, specifically service level reductions, and a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land, specifically a motel purchase for emergency shelter. Would someone care to, thank you, Councillor Body, Councillor Hutchison, any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. So we'll just wait until the